Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. Shiva. I'm sorry for the false start. Sometimes when you're in a new place, you have to do all these setups, but I think we got it all set up here. So let's just wait until people rejoin and we'll start because I know I had a false start. So to everyone waiting, you can rejoin now. So I'm actually doing a live on really about victory to the free market and what this means. In particular, we're going to talk about Elizabeth Warren's response. And we're going to be having a discussion about what's going on with GameStop and the stock squeeze that's taken place. But we're going to take a systems approach to understanding this because with a systems approach, you can actually start seeing the dynamics of what's taking place. It's everything that I've been talking about in the platform and the educational platform that we're building for truth, freedom, and health, where we're teaching people the foundations of systems. And as a part of that, we teach people why it's important to build a bottoms-up movement, the interconnection between freedom, free market, free speech, and how that really gives us real innovation and truth, and how that really helps the health of our economy, our bodies, our infrastructure. And with that strength, we can fight for more freedom. And what we're witnessing right now is something quite phenomenal that took place, a bottoms-up movement that took place that really through the elites and particularly the not so obvious establishment. We'll talk about people like Elizabeth Warren shortly and how they participate in this. But just before I start that, all of you should be aware that one of the most important things that we need to do now is to start getting educated. So as a part of that, please take time to go visit this new platform that we're building on Vashiva.com. I'll share that with you quickly. So if you go to Vashiva.com, on that website, you will see that we've started to build a platform for educating you. And you can, and I'll go into this shortly, but you can, all of you can join this platform by simply going to vashiva.com/join. And I'll go there right now. If we go to vashiva.com/join, it is a platform that we're putting together that really is to embolden and educate all of you on the dynamics of systems. And with that dynamic, you can actually start appreciating what's going on here. And this is the website. It's Join VA. It's Join, essentially the movement for truth, freedom, and health. But one of the central things we're doing is we're building the platform with education, with communications, and tools that you can do for action. So anyone can support this. But one of the most important things is anyone can become a member at no cost. But I want you to make a commitment to getting educated. The first thing that we want to do is to teach people systems. And that's what we're going to learn about the GameStop and the stock system, how the media and how insider activists take place. There's a whole thing called activist investors. Okay, and I'll talk to you about that. And I'll share with you one of the work that came out of our systems work, one of my students at MIT did to really show the dynamics of how all of this works. We'll give you a little preview into that. But most importantly, I want to educate all of you to become truth, freedom, and health warriors. It's a course where you learn the foundations of systems and you get access to textbook and tools. And particularly, you'll learn why it's important to understand the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health, why it's important to understand why we need to build a bottoms-up movement. And most importantly, we're going to apply this today to what I call the not so obvious establishment, the people who are fake fighters on medical freedom, election integrity, and all of this stuff. And Elizabeth Warren is a case in point. So we're going to talk about that right now. So just to review what took place over the last several days was let me just write to this person. What took place over the last several days was that we had a event take place where the set of investors were actually shorting a stock. In fact, they were shorting it at over 100% of what was actually out there in terms of the actual stock, 130%. And if you even talk to smart hedge fund people, they say this was absolutely insane. Okay, so they were actually getting extremely greedy, and their goal was to destroy this stock. And that's what shorting does. It wants people to drive down the price of the stock, and people profit from that. Now, one of the interesting things that I want to share with you is in the Foundations of Systems course that I put together. In that course, I used to teach it at MIT, and that became a part of systems visualization, which was a course I used to teach where we used to integrate systems thinking, ability to convey information, data, and my students would do amazing projects. It was one of the most popular electives at MIT. And I want to just share with you what one of my students did. And what you see in this, diagram is that you see the relationship between the public, how the public perceives the actual ways that the stock market, the economy works, which is in the blue, and a company, and information flows. And you can see, without getting into all the details, there's a very complex dynamics here, how companies and organizations intertwined with Wall Street, which is really represented on the left with the blue, can really manipulate stocks. And it's a very intricate dynamic. And you can see, for example, they can send out news, they can send out stuff on social media, and then they can manipulate pricing on the stock. The reason I wanted you to look at this is you can see in this dynamic, very, very interesting enough, that this is a game that investors have been playing for a long time. Okay, this ability to send out blips of information and then to get the hype going. And that's what my student was really doing, looking at the dynamics. But for many, many years, for decades, the Wall Street is actually an insider game run by a bunch of guys from Yale and Harvard, where they meet over wine and they manipulate the stock. Okay, Wall Street is fundamentally insider trading. And this is something we need to understand. And most of us, everyday working people, we're not part of that. And it's a whole machine that runs on its own to help the elites. And this dynamic that I'm sharing you with what my student did, it's a very complex dynamics, and they have it down to a machinery. And what's particular to understand in this is that there are people called activist investors. Go look it up, activist investors. You can Google it right now. What is an activist investor? And I found out about this about 5-10 years ago, that they are investors who can be ruthless. They actually, a group gets together, they want to, let's say, eliminate the CEO in a company, or they want to buy out a company. They will actually get together. It's legal. This is sort of legal corruption. These activist investors will then target a company to either destroy them or to enhance them, and they'll start putting out news as we're putting out either fake news or real news, and they'll take ads out, media ads, they'll spread rumors, and it's a very, very powerful way, and they call themselves activists, right? To move an industry in a certain direction, or just because they don't like somebody, all right? So this is what I mean, the insider game. So these activist investors have been around. People like Elizabeth Warren, the senators know about them. All the insiders, the lawyers are all part of this. So this is something that's been going on for decades. What occurred over the last week was everyday people, started using social media, like you see in this diagram here, and they went on Reddit in this case, and they were pissed off that a small finite group of people were really shorting the stock GameStop and a couple of others, Nokia, I think, and AMC, and they essentially did their own activism among millions of people, which is what the Yaleys and the Harvard people have been doing behind closed doors. But these guys did it. And what they ended up doing was they essentially really screwed these little cliques of Wall Street guys who've been doing it for a long, long time. And it shows the power of what can happen when people go bottoms up and they start using whatever channels they have. And it was done organically. But the reason it bothered these guys is because power was taken away from them. So one of the things I talk about when you look at systems, and by the way, every Monday nights, everyone's welcome. Go onto the site, vashiva.com/join. My intent is, whether it's election fraud, medical freedom, every one of these issues, stocks, Wall Street, if you can understand how systems operate, and you can understand these three principles, the interconnection between freedom, truth, and health, and you can understand how to really understand relationships between systems like these diagrams, you can really figure this out. But most importantly, you'll figure out that a bottoms-up movement, which is the second principle, and the notion of why we need to target the not-so-obvious establishment. So I want to move to that. So what did Elizabeth Warren do? Well, Elizabeth Warren gets out there and she goes, we need to stop this stock manipulation, right? And she wrote this crazy letter. Well, let's talk about Elizabeth Warren and people like her, because this is the essence of why large movements get shunted, because whenever the small guys start winning, okay, doing something that perturbs the elites, we have people like Elizabeth Warren come along and act as though she's for us. In 2018, I ran against her. My slogan was only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian. And that slogan was really have nothing to do with her race, but it was more about the fact this woman has no integrity. And she represents people like AOC, Bernie Sanders, and others on the left and the right. And what these people do is, or the Kennedys, they act like they're for the working people. What they actually do, and listen very carefully, the not so obvious establishment, the fake fighters, they talk a game of, oh my God, we want to help people. This was wrong. What happened to working people? But what they want to do is, under the guise of protecting the public, they will bring regulations. And those regulations are a way to actually support the big guy. So let me give you an example. Dodd-Frank, which Elizabeth Warren supported, okay? Remember when there was all these events during the dot-com boom and when the banking crisis took place, because there was all this insider trading among the big guys. So what did they do? They said, oh my God, in order to protect the small guys and the people, we need to create regulations. And Elizabeth Warren supported that. But what did those regulations actually do? Now, listen very carefully. Whenever people say, I'm for your safety, I want to protect you, be it on vaccines or any of these things, we need regulations. What they're actually saying is they're going to impose regulations that can only be afforded by the few, because the regulations create so much onus, so much paperwork. This happened to small doctors in the medical field with Obamacare. Small doctors weren't able to compete with big hospitals, so because they needed to hire 2-3 more administrators to do all the paperwork. That's what happened with Dodd-Frank, which Elizabeth Warren supported under the guise of helping you, the people. What did that do? Well, the United States is a very vibrant banking system. We used to have about 10,000 small banks. Most other countries have 4 major banks. So when the big guys actually were manipulating for a long time, and they, caused all sorts of market issues, people like Elizabeth Warren said, oh, we need to protect the public. So they pushed Dodd-Frank. And what Dodd-Frank really did, it created so much regulations that many of the small banks, the mom and pop banks, which help entrepreneurs, they help your local carpenter, they help your local small businessman. We lost nearly 2,000 small banks, went out of business. And it actually beefed up the big banks. You see how that works? Because the big banks, they can fund regulations. It's a very small part of their P&L. This is why Mark Zuckerberg and the social media companies actually want regulations now. Because when they get regulations, it'll keep, let's say, new social media companies who can compete with Facebook out of the, keep them out. This is what the not so obvious establishment does. What they do is, under the guise of wanting to protect you, they're going to use this incident because bottoms up movement took place. A real sort of a revolutionary thing took place. It's a small little blip of a revolution, but nonetheless, something that shows what happens from a system standpoint when things bubble up from the bottom. It was very powerful. So Elizabeth Warren, the not so obvious establishment, will come to the rescue of Wall Street. That's what you're going to see. She's going to say, we need this regulation, that regulation. And what it is, those regulations are actually to protect the hedge fund guys. So we don't become activist investors. I hope that makes sense. You see, they've been doing activist investing to manipulate the market, but they don't want everyday working people to do that. One rule for them and another rule for us. That's what this is about. This is about one rule for them and another rule for us. This is why I encourage all of you. What I just shared with you is a systems analysis, which lays out an understanding of people like Elizabeth Warren, people like AOC, people like Bernie Sanders on the left, and people on the right also do this. You see, what the left and the right is they collaborate. So the left imposes regulations, and what do regulations do? They create monopolies. They destroy the small guys, and the right profits from that. The left and the right, Republicans and Democrats, work together. They're on the same team, and you and I are not on that same team. So what occurred over the last week was us, everyday people started becoming activist investors, and they screwed these guys. And that's why Elizabeth Warren, the not so obvious establishment, is going to come to their rescue by saying, oh my God, I want to help you. We need to have the SEC step in. Well, what they're really saying is we need to have protections for the elites. And that's what this is about. So I encourage all of you, please, every Mondays, we need to create a educated group of people who get these concepts. You need to understand how systems work. You need to understand this interconnection, that the free market, that's what we really need. And that's what we had. We had an opportunity for free market, freedom, free speech. With that freedom, we can have real innovation, real truth, real explosion in the economy of ideas that are suppressed by these insiders. And with that innovation, we can get true healthy markets, true healthy financial systems, true health for your body. And that makes us stronger. So that interconnection between truth, freedom, and health is what is very important to learn from a systems perspective, and why we need a bottoms-up movement, the second principle. And the third is a not so obvious establishment. I just want to point you to this, because when you go literally to review this, let me go back here on Vashivacom join, you'll see right on the top, that's what I talk about. I say, welcome to Vashivacom, the revolutionary platform being developed by Dr. Shiva, the man who invented email. The platform provides foundational education curricula and innovative tools empower you to be a force to deliver the solutions to affect truth, freedom, and health in your local communities. But one of the most important principles that I talk about here, it's really, really important, as you see in these three things, to understand the foundations of systems. So we understand how these systems principles work everywhere in nature. They work everywhere. So part of this is when you start looking at the stock system here, you start understanding this systems analysis. You start seeing that the blue area, which is Wall Street, the companies, how they can manipulate stock, how they work with these investors, understanding these interconnections, it's what's central to really seeing through in a situation like this, where the future is going. As I talked about, I'm able to predict a lot of this future. Anyone can do this once you understand these interconnections. What we're witnessing right now is Elizabeth Warren, mark my words, is going to lead this effort. What's going to sound like she's going to help working people, but she's a fake fighter, like she's a fake Indian. What it's really intended is to help. It's really intended to help Wall Street, just like they did with the big banks, Dodd-Frank. So regulations, the left will talk about regulations. It'll create monopolies, and that's where the right, profits, right? They all work hand in hand. So I hope this was valuable in understandings, but please start getting educated, or you're going to be enslaved, because these things will occur. And the analysis I did is something that I want to educate everyone to do. Foundations of systems. But here, what we're watching right before our eyes with Elizabeth Warren is the not so obvious establishment trying to fake people out when we actually had a bottoms-up movement. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to sharing with you more analysis like this from a systems approach. If you want me to cover anything, please send me an email to vashiva@vashiva.com. That writes directly to me, comes right to me. Thank you very much. Hope this is valuable. Be well.